Hi guys, it's Jake here at Canadian Cutting Edge. It's another Fixed Blade Friday, and it's another kitchen knife Fixed Blade Friday. I've got a knife from Puma Knives, pumaknives.ca to be exact. There are apparently two Puma Knives dealers in Canada. This is a brand new one, pumaknives.ca. Zachary Hewitt is the distributor who's starting this up. He's in the Ottawa area, east end of Ontario. He's a what am I going to call him? He's definitely a woodworker. He's got a woodworking business. He doesn't call himself a cabinet maker. He put a picture on Facebook the other day of this great big live edge table that he made. Oh, nice thick table, really nice stuff. The kind of stuff that I was really into making back when my body was able to do that kind of thing when I was young. Anyhow, Puma knives, most of them have wood handles, or a lot of them have wood handles, I should say, not most of them. This is yew wood, which is common in Germany, which is where this knife is made. Solingen, Germany. It's got German steel, the Krupp-Thyssen 4116 steel. Very high corrosion resistance, good toughness, and I think it's a very good steel for cooking knives. And that's exactly what they use this steel for. It was originally designed as a steel, and they were targeting the medical industry because it's so corrosion resistant. And, eventually it became the leading steel for kitchen knives. And I think it still probably is, although, things are slowly changing because there's more and more newer steels coming out all the time. And people are, wanting stuff like VG10 and things. But 4116 is a very good steel for a kitchen knife, in large part because it's got a lot of properties, a lot like 440C, its durability, how easy it is to sharpen and stuff, and yet it has higher corrosion resistance. And in a kitchen, you're often getting your knives wet, and that's really good for that. And yew wood is great for that as well. It's a very durable wood. It's not common, but it's not rare. It's a wood that's it's not in danger or anything, but it's a slow growing tree. It's a nice durable wood, and it feels really nice on the hand. It feels and looks a lot like cherry. And so there you go. This is the Santuko style, although they're calling it just the cook's knife. The Puma cook's knife is what they call it. And so the Santuko style is like this nose right here, this sheep's foot nose, and then you've got a blade that's got a little bit of a belly in it, and that's what a Santuko generally is. So if you're interested at all in this knife, stick around for the rest of the review. We've got these brass pins, 3 of them through the blade, full tang, as you can see all the way back to here. And it's been hand sanded very well. They call these knives handmade. I like to call them hand finished. They do a lot of the rough work using, machines and stuff, and the forging stuff that gets done. And then that's just the rough work. But all of the final work is done by hand. Like the main grind on the side here, that's done by hand. All the finish work is done by hand. All the final shaping is done by hand. And of course, all the wood sanding and stuff, and putting it together and stuff. It's not a machine that puts these pins in here and presses them on. They have a human putting these pins in, and it's hand finished, hand put together, hand assembled, hand worked. So handmade is a reasonable thing to call it. I just like to use the term hand finished. You've got the logos and everything right there on the blade. I don't know if I can get the light just right for that. That's about the best I can do. So right there, you see the Puma logo. Let's talk a little bit more about the steel first. It's 1.4116 is generally how it's referred to, although most people in North America just call it 4116. It has a Rockwell of around 58, 57 to 59, so I just say 58, which is a good Rockwell hardness, especially for a kitchen knife. There's no coating on this blade. There's nothing else. It's just got this nice satin finish. You've got a Santuko design, as I already mentioned. Full flat grind, as you can see right here. It's just one grind all the way down. Cutting edge, 16 centimeters, that's 6.3 inches. That's right up to where my thumbnail is right there, from there to the tip. Blade length, so handle to tip, 17.1 centimeters, that's 6.73 inches. Blade thickness, I measured right back here at the handle because, it slowly gets thinner as you get to the tip. Very slowly, actually, so nothing abrupt. Very well done for hand grinding, to be honest with you. 2.41 millimeters, that's 0.095 inches. So good thickness for a kitchen knife to start with. The thickness of the edge behind the grind, this blew my socks off. This is very, very good. 0.21 millimeters, so less than a quarter of a millimeter. That's 0.008 of an inch. So that's 8 thousandths of an inch. Tens, hundredths, thousands, yeah. 8 thousandths of an inch. On a kitchen knife like this, you want that to be thin. You want it to be thick enough to be durable, but you want it to be thin so that it's a great slicer. This one is very thin, and I like it. I'm going to have to probably come back and give you some more feedback after, my wife has also used it for a while. I'm calling this a review, but it's going to have a follow-up video probably in 2 months or so after we've used it for a greater period of time. I believe that this edge is going to be durable. 4116 is a good steel for that, but being how thin it is, it's going to have to require some more long-term use, and I'll tell you if the edge gets damaged too easily, if the retention for actual kitchen use is really good or not. I'm getting distracted, aren't I? I always do that halfway between the measurements. I talk about the steel and the edge, and then I get distracted, and then I talk about the handle. So here we are, handle. Handle length, 12.16 centimeters. That's 4.79 inches. The grip area back here, I'm calling it 11.7 centimeters, 4.6 inches. The handle thickness is 1.68 centimeters. That's 0.66 of an inch. It gets a bit thinner where your index fingers are. It's easy to grasp up here. It's nice and small, no big bolster there. Total length of the knife is 29.1 centimeters. That's 11.46 inches. Now, I've measured what is actually on mine. It's very close to what is on the stats on the website. The thing is, since these are all basically hand finished, handmade, each and every one of them is going to be very slightly different. And that's a beautiful thing. Weight, 138 grams, 4.85 ounces. Now, I wanted to talk about this knife. All of my knives that I've had recently, I used to just buy those commercially produced kitchen knives. Here in North America, here in Canada, we often go shopping at a place called Canadian Tire. And at this time of year, they've got big bundles of knives, kitchen sets that you can buy at apparently a huge 70, 80% discount. They are overpriced by about 50% to start with. So the discount's not really that great, but it's there. Anyhow, almost all of the knives from the mass producers that do those things have knives that have this little bit of a heel on them right there. So when you're cutting, let's lift this up like this so you can see that edge. So that when you're cutting, the end of your blade goes down here, and when it's brand new, the entire cutting edge very easily gets onto the table, and it's really easy to cut stuff right there at the heel of the knife. But as you sharpen this thing a few more times, that cutting edge starts to creep up, and then you've got this heel here, and then you'll have airspace. When you're cutting on something, you won't be able to cut with this part of the blade. It'll be up here somewhere where you'll be able to start cutting with, because that foot stays too low. Now, there is a workaround for that, and that is when you sharpen it, or just before you go to sharpen it, every 5 or 6 times that you sharpen it or something, you take this thing to a file or a grinder or something, and you take this down a little bit. That's a way to work around it. Or if you've got a knife like this one that I reviewed recently, and I'm not going to compare, I'm not even going to bring up the other brand, but if you see this knife here, it's got none of that foot, none of that heel right there. You can always cut right up to here. You can always sharpen right up to there. Since I tested with this knife, I became very enamored with that idea. So I really like this way of making a blade over this way of making a blade. But it's not a big deal really, because that's easy to work around if you remember to. If you just sharpen your knife and sharpen your knife and sharpen your knife, you know, you're not going to like that. But it's steel. If you know how to sharpen a knife, you can take steel off of here if you can take steel off of here, right? So just make sure you remember to take this down a little bit when you sharpen your knives. And then you're finished with that problem. The other option that a guy could do is, for one time, he could take it to a grinder and grind this angle off. You could take it off like that. Instead of leaving all of that metal there, just grind it off like that, and then you don't have that problem anymore. Sorry, it's not really a problem. You don't have that condition anymore. So many different options that you can deal with. Now, let's test this knife out. I've got an apple here, and I've got a carrot that I'll show off a little bit later. And this edge behind the grind is indeed very thin. It's thinner than any other kitchen knife that I've tested. If you remember the other video when I cut an apple, the end of it broke. Not this one. This is my first time cutting an apple, and it cut just great. Let's slice through this. Again, slices straight through. No cracking. I am super impressed with this knife. Cuts very, very easily. Cuts very, very well. You know, generally when you cut with a knife like this, you do a little bit of a slicing action, moving the blade back or forth. But even if you just go straight down, it slices very, very well. I am super, super impressed. This is my first time cutting food with it. My wife used it a little bit and she said she really liked it, but this is my first try. Might as well eat some of the apple. A lot of guys slide their knife across a cutting board like this when they move food over. It's smarter to either use the spine of your blade or make sure you don't take your blade all the way down and slide it across, especially if you've got those nylon plasticky kind of cutting boards. You're ruining your edge every time you slide it across. Another thing is if you're using a plate and you've got your food in there, don't do what I just did. That's quite hard on the edge to be cutting down on a plate like that. Wood is the best stuff to use for cutting board. Wow. Loads of control. Cuts very well. Great action. It feels just great in hand. That cuts very, very well. It had a very sharp edge to start with, but I always sharpen my own knives. I sharpened it to 15 degrees, and it sharpened, just as easily as I expected 4116 to sharpen. And very, very smooth cutting. And as I mentioned with the apple, it's not breaking when it gets partway through, and that's because it stays thin all the way up. I did another measurement. You know how I like the cutting edge to be 0.5 millimeter or thinner? On outdoor knives, it can be thicker and stuff. You can go up 5 centimeters, not 5 centimeters, 5 millimeters before you get to 0.5 millimeter thick. So I can sharpen this knife. So this piece of apple is 5 millimeters thick this way. I can take off that much steel, and then the edge behind the grind is going to be 0.5 millimeter thick. Right now, it's 0.21, and up there it's 0.5. So I can sharpen it that many times. That's a lot of sharpening. The other kitchen knife that I showed you before, it started off a fair bit thicker, and I also measured it, and I can sharpen it this many times to get to 0.5 millimeter, or I can sharpen it this many times to get to 0.5 millimeter. Those two knives are very close to the same price. And I'll tell you what, for my money right now, I'd rather buy the Puma. We will be testing both of these knives over the next couple months or so, and you'll get more feedback from me again. I like this handle an awful lot. It's got flat sides, which always gives you just a lot of control. It helps you with your muscle memory to know exactly what angle you get the knife at, whereas a round handle can sometimes, you might be off a little bit, not this much, but you're off just a little bit and you're cutting, and it's just not the greatest. So I like a knife handle that's got some flatness on the sides. I like natural wood finishes. I really like this steel. The tip cuts very well if you need to cut that way. So, nutshell, what do I think about this? What do I not like about this? What do I do like about this? There's nothing I don't like about this. I like that there's a dealership in Canada that is sent this to me to review. So I appreciate that tremendously. Please, if you're going to buy one of these on my recommendation, check my links in the description below. Go to pumaknives.ca and buy it from that vendor. He's the one who, is taking the risk of sending me knives to review. I've got absolute 100% freedom to say anything I want about these knives. No obligation to give a good review. And, so I'm saying what I think about it. Handcrafted in Germany, always like handcrafted. If you don't like buying knives from China, well, here you go. Here's an option from Germany. I know there's some people that don't really like certain brands, and I'm one of those guys. I try not to base any of my opinion on politics or any of the history of a company. Companies go through ownership changes, especially a company like this. This company's 245 years old. It's had leadership changes. So I don't talk about, the leaders of the company, the owners, their character and stuff. Think that has nothing to do with it. I just look at the very product itself and if I think it's worth it or not. And then you have to decide if you think it's worth it or not. It's on sale right now. It's normally $110.50. It's $94.99 Canadian. Check out pumaknives.ca. And if you buy one, let Zachary know that you saw this on Canadian Cutting Edge. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. And remember, always chop towards your chum and not your thumb. Bye now.